Hey everyone, welcome to another lecture of this JWT authentication system in Golang. So in this lecture, we are going to talk a bit about what is RBAC and what is the DB schema design that we are going to follow for this project and what all are all the API endpoints that we are going to build. Alright, so yeah, let's get started. So first, what is RBAC? So in the previous lecture, I discussed that we have authentication and then at first we have authentication and then we have authorization, right? So this RBAC, it falls into this authorization method. So it is an authorization model for managing user permissions. So what happens is that, see, in your platform, you are going to have a lot of users and there are some actions, right? So, there are some actions which you want that only a specific group of users have the ability to do it, right? So there are going to be actions which only a specific set of users, so a specific set of users will be able to do. So I hope this point is clear. And for that, what will happen is that you will basically create roles for them, so right? So you will create roles, like you will have a user role, you will have a admin role, you will have a viewer role, you will have a editor role, and all these different roles will define what the user can do on this platform, right? And that is why these roles are very important. So you see, you have your users and you have these roles, and you basically assign these roles to the users, which will define that what the users can do on the platform or what actions they can take. So there are three entities involved in this entire RBAC model. The number one is the users, number two is the roles, and number three is the permissions. So the users and these roles is pretty much clear, I believe. Now what are these permissions? So these permissions, they only define the actions which the particular role is able to do on the resource. So what actions this user role can do on the platform is defined by permissions. What actions the admin can do on the platform is defined by your permissions. Similarly, all these permissions are defined for each and every roles, right? Which tells what specific role can do what sort of action on the platform. So I believe the point is clear. Now, talking about from a SQL point of view, a user can have many roles. So let's say that you have an admin role, a viewer role, and editor role. Then a single user, he can have many roles. At the same time, multiple users can share the same role. So what it means is that user and role, they have a many to many relationship, right? Similarly, a single role can have many permissions. At the same time, multiple roles can share the same permission. Hence, again, this role has a many to many relationship with these permissions. So this is how RBAC works. So it is very clear, the concept is very easy, and you will understand more when you actually go and build this project, right? So that will give you a lot more practical confidence and more practical knowledge. So that's it for this RBAC. Now let's talk about this DB schema design. So see, in this backend project, we are not going to play with these permissions, right? I am only going to play with this users and roles entity. I am not going to do anything with these permissions. Why? Because we can just skip these permissions. We don't at all need this permissions thing. So if a user has a specific role, then we will let the user do some things, right? So we can also control it without permissions, and that is what we are actually going to do over here. But yeah, that is just your wish. So if you want a permissions entity altogether, you can have that. There is no problem at all, and that is what you will have in production level. But yeah, in this project, I am not going to create the permissions table. I want to make it a bit simpler. So yeah, that's why we don't have a permissions table. So in the DB schema, we will have 5 tables. We will have the users table, role table, user roles, session table, and this OTP table. So as I told earlier that this user has a many-to-many relationship with this role, hence for this relationship thing, we want a join table, right? So we want a join or a through table, which will basically join these two tables, this user and this role table. And that is what we have over here, this user role table, right? So this is the users table. So these are the columns that we are going to have. We are going to have the ID, we are going to have username, email, password, is verified, created at, updated at, right? Pretty easy. And what is this is verified? So it is going to be a boolean which depicts if this user is verified or not, and I am going to talk about it a bit later when we are going to build the login and the register endpoints. Next, we are going to have this role table where we have this ID column, name, description, created at, updated at. So this name will basically, will be something like admin, viewer, editor, and this description will be a short description of this role, right? To remove ambiguity and to join this users table and this roles table, because you see they are in a many-to-many relationship. Hence we want a join table, and that is what we have over here. We have this user role table where we have the ID, then we have this user ID, which will be a foreign key pointing to this ID of users table. Then we are going to have a role ID, which is going to be the foreign key pointing to this ID of this role table, and then the plain and simple created and updated columns, right? And next we are going to have a session table. So this session is something that I am going to explain in the login endpoint video, because even if I explain it over here, you won't be able to understand it a lot, right? So still, what is a session table? So whenever you are logging, we are going to create a session, right? So at the time of login, we create a new session. Alright, so this is what this session is all about, and it is going to have the ID column, the user ID, which is again the foreign key pointing to the ID of this users table. Then we are going to have a refresh token hash. So what is it? So into this session table, as I told earlier, we are going to generate 2 tokens, this access token and this refresh token. So in this session table, we are also going to store this refresh token. But why do we add it over here is something that I am going to answer during our logging endpoint video. So please have some patience. So this is the refresh token, and again, just like password, we don't store this refresh token directly as it is, because if the hacker somehow hacks our database, then our refresh token might get compromised. So again, we hash it and we store the hashed refresh token, just like password. And then we have a is revoked boolean, which basically depicts if this session is an expired or not, right? So whenever you log out from this session or you log out from all session, you will basically revoke all these sessions, and that is what this revoke logic is all about. And then you are going to have the good old created at and the updated at columns. Next, we are going to have a OTP table. So what will actually happen is that when you register, an OTP email will be sent. So over here an OTP email will be sent, and then you have to verify your email by this OTP. And for verifying this OTP, we are going to need this OTP table. So into this OTP table, we are going to store the ID column, we are going to store the user ID, which is again the foreign key which points to this ID of this users table, and then we are going to store the user email, which is this property, this email thing. and then we are also going to store the actual OTP, and then the good old created at and the updated at timestamps. So we are going to use this OTP table when the user has to verify the OTP. Alright, so that is basically this DB schema. So we are going to have 5 of these tables, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Now for the API endpoints design, I have grouped them into 4 basically router groups, which are the auth endpoints, user endpoints, role endpoints, user role endpoints. Now inside this auth endpoints, we are going to have this 6 endpoints, which is number 1, an endpoint to register the user, number 2, an endpoint to login user, number 3, an endpoint to refresh the access tokens. So if you remember in the previous lecture, I told that we are going to have a refresh endpoint which will require this refresh token, and it will generate this new access token. So whenever your access token has been expired, you will hit this refresh endpoint. So this is basically the refresh token endpoint. Next, we are going to have an endpoint which will log out the user from a session, then another endpoint which will log out the user from all sessions, and an endpoint using which the user can verify his email. Next, we have this users router group, wherein we are going to have endpoints for getting all the users, getting a single user by ID, updating a user, deleting a user, and getting the current user, right? And then we have this roles router group, where we will have endpoints for getting all the roles, getting a single role by ID, creating a role, updating a role, deleting a role. And then at the last, we have this user role endpoints, using which we can get all the roles that has been assigned to a specific user. Then we can assign a specific role to this user, then an endpoint using which we can remove a role from user, and then we are going to have endpoints for checking if a user has a single role, like we are checking if a user has a specific role. Alright, and then we are going to have 2 endpoints which will check if the user has all the roles. So basically this will be an array of roles, so this will be an array or collection of roles, and we will have an endpoint which will check if this user has all the roles specified in this array, and another endpoint which will check if this user has any role out of this array that we are going to mention. Alright, so these are the user role endpoints, and I hope that's clear. And even if it's not, then please don't stress over it. You will understand more when you are going to build them in the upcoming lectures. So yeah, that's it for this lecture, guys. And in the next lecture, we are going to set up the project, create the GitHub repo, and just start hands-on coding. So that's it for this lecture, guys. Take a break, keep coding hard, and I will meet you in the next lecture.
Let me tell you about that VE. I'ma be your recruitment.